I identify as a startup junkie. I've done 6 of them. I love building something from scratch. Where I was the only woman in the room for a really long time. And I love that. I think it's a competitive advantage. And I don't think any technology will ever replace human connection. I would argue it's one of the things that will allow you to scale.
Christina, welcome to House of Visionaries podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Powered by Bond. We're so excited to have you here.
Thank you.
First, we'd like to actually start off with a quick intro to you. Ben and I know a little bit about you. We've had a couple chats heading into this, but Rapid7, tell us about the journey. Tell us a little bit about you, whatever you feel is relevant to share with us, your kind of personal story and where that's woven into Rapid7 today.
You'll quickly learn. I love talking about other people, and I'm really good at teasing questions out of people. I hate talking about myself. So that should be a great intro to this conversation. But I will say what you should know about me. I think of myself, or I identify, to use today's language, I identify as a startup junkie. I've done 6 of them. I love building something from scratch, and I'm probably fairly unique in the space of this industry of human resources, because number one, I don't love the field, which is kind of a divisive thing to say, but I don't really love how it's been evolving over the years. And I've spent my career focused on building culture, and sort of very early in my career stumbled onto why the hell do we even call it human resources in the first place? I think my printer is a resource, not a human being. And if you're trying to scale and grow a business, I view it as my job to work backwards and say, what's the business strategy? And then I have to create the people strategy that's going to inspire, motivate, drive people to sort of all row the boat in the same direction to achieve that. That's not rocket science. I don't think there's anything particularly special about that. I'm just surprised a lot more people don't do it that way. So I look at the work that I do as much more strategic and proactive versus just the reactive, we need to hire X number of people, or we need to fire these people, or promote them. I mean, look, all those things happen, but I think the way in which you do that, the way in which you engage with the human beings in your company is what makes companies ultimately stand out, aside from their great products and other things that they do.
You've got such a human, refreshing kind of, human is the word that comes to mind approach to all of this, both in your energy, but also I think the way that you talk about the field and most of what this whole thing is about. House of Visionaries, Bond in general, we're a bit of a disruptor in the space, but House of Visionaries certainly is around pushing the envelope a little bit and breaking out of some of these like traditional kind of heavy feeling or like slow moving definitions. So we were very excited to have you today. Ben wore his Bruins hat just for you.
Thank you.
Just to prove he's a Boston fan.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, your offices are based in the stadium pretty much. So
we're literally in the old garden space. Yeah. So we built a new building, and we're actually the patch partners to the Bruins. So, if you ever turn on your TV and see Rapid7, that's where you've seen it, which is kind of cool. I mean,
Well, we're hoping we're going to see it
cybersecurity doesn't have anything to do with hockey, but it's been pretty cool to be able to work with them and be their partner.
I was going to say, we were hoping we're going to see it from the suite next time, not from
I
the
hope.
TV.
Yeah, well, you guys got to give me a heads up, and we'll hook you up for sure.
So you've been at Rapid7 since the beginning. 14. Well,
not
the beginning, but since
but yeah, I joined when we were.
The majority of
I'm
the
going to
journey.
break out in stress hives, admitting how long I've been here. It's been almost 14 years. I joined when we were 75 people.
Yeah.
And because I think of myself as a startup person, when I joined, I'd come from another cybersecurity company, and I thought, I've always been in tech, but I didn't want to necessarily do the same thing. And I said I would join on, but I thought, okay, I will help us get to an event. So, whether we sell the company or we go public or something, like that's what I'm happy to help us get to. And then I'm out, and I'm going to go do it again, because I've been playing this role. I mean, this sounds a little weird, but I've been in the chief people officer role since my 20s, which isn't like a big deal in today's world, but it was a big deal back then, and I was just at the right place at the right time, and maybe I'm
a little more to it than that, I think.
Maybe,
probably,
but I mean, a lot of that was just sort of how it all played out. I'd like to think I've gotten better over the years. but I think it was a great disruptive time to kind of figure it out, and how do you get there and how do you build it. And you said disruptor, and I think that gets tied to me a lot, but not on purpose. Like I do what I think is the right thing to do, not
Authentic.
because I'm trying to make a point.
Yeah.
But I like rebranded. I'm not going to be called human resources. So arrogant at age whatever 24, where I think I really know what I'm doing now. I've like had one job, and now they gave me a lot of space to go figure it out. So I cold called my way into a little company called Sapient, which is now this like huge thing. But back then it was a bunch of 20-somethings building a company, and it was a really beautiful thing because we didn't know what we didn't know, and we screwed up left, right, and center. But you just get up, dust yourself off, try something else, and I think that allowed me. Like I just said, I'm not human resources. I'm people strategy. You got business strategy. I'm people strategy, and I rebranded it, and that's allowed me sort of the platform to be able to build all of this different stuff over the years. So
I have to ask this: when you say you cold called your way in, did you just wedge yourself into a job there? How did that?
You want this is like embarrassing.
Absolutely.
And
Let's get into the real stuff.
the real stuff is there were 2 CEOs, and I picked the cuter one to call because I thought
I figured there was a story there.
I'm like, that's such a horrible strategy to admit, but I'm like,
use what you've got.
you use what you got. So it worked.
And look at you today.
Yeah, but it. I think it was more. It wasn't, just that. But I mean, I think it was the one that like one was much more technically driven, one was more sales driven. I thought I could connect with that person more, and did. And the thing that was beautiful about it, or the thing that I think has allowed me to have any success in this field, like I might have some interesting ideas and whatever, maybe I'm decent at what I do, but I think my superpower, if you will, is I've been pretty good at figuring out the leaders to bet on and the companies that I think have a chance of going somewhere. And I could never articulate what that is, but I know it when I see it. And like I suck at a lot of things, but that I'm really good at. So I've bet on some pretty good leaders.
I think just even hearing the framing of that story of how you got to be who you are today, both as, not that we know you intimately yet, but like kind of a bit about your energy and your approach to this space, and also just the work that you've done in your role. Probably a separate podcast conversation for another day, but such an interesting way to just hear that journey of how you got into your role as a chief people officer. You kind of worked your way there, and like you talk about this process.
But there's
being
one
a bit
other
of a lateral
element to it that I'll add in, right? Which I don't know where this comes from, but my first job out of college was recruiting, and I was working at a hyper growth consulting firm, and my job was to hire MBA students out of Harvard Business School, Sloan, et cetera, like great schools, and these people were all like 2 years older than me. And it was really intimidating because I'm like, oh my God, these people are so well educated and they're so brilliant. And then you get to know them, and I'm like, they're not smarter than me. They're just like really well educated.
They all put their
might
pants
be
on
smart.
the same way.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm like, and they're really good at X, but I'm really good at Y. And it highlighted or crystallized this one idea that has lasted all these years for me, which is, why not me? And like I was getting to know them, and I thought, if they can do that work, like, could I? Why couldn't I? So I went back to school at night, which is brutal, but like gave up my life for 2 years, got a master's because that was the only way that I was going to be able to do consulting work at that company. And I became a consultant just because I wanted to see if I could do it. And it allowed me to understand the work from the customer perspective, et cetera. So it like really well rounded me out. But that why not me has stayed with me now for like 30 years. And I love it. I mean, I'll never play professional basketball because I'm 5'1", but I think ultimately I really believe if there's something that I want to do, if you have like enough positive attitude and the aptitude to do it and you work your butt off, you can pretty much do anything. And conversely, not to get super personal, but that why not me that has lasted me and served me well all these years, I got I was diagnosed with cancer last summer, and I think people tend to go into situations like that and think, oh my God, why me? Why me? And I thought, why not me applies to this too, right? Like there's nothing special about me. We all have crap in our lives. This just happens to be my crap at this time, and I'll just apply the same like good attitude and like, what do I need to do to get through that? So why not me is just sort of like, I have it written on a sticky note,
So cool.
and it's in a frame above my desk at home, and I just
mantra.
stare at it all the time.
Where do you think that comes from? Because it's so inspirational, by the way. When you hear you talk about stuff like that, it's very.
I think it's
it makes you
'cause,
feel
like,
like you're invincible. It makes me feel.
Maybe,
next to you, I'm
but, like,
I can
I think-
do anything. Where
I
does
think
that
it's like
come
I'm a
from?
short, like, girl. Like when I started my career, I think everyone's like, oh, there's the girl who's focused on the people stuff. And I was really young, playing pretty senior roles. And I remember like one of the startups that I joined, we were literally like I existed before the company even started. I got brought in by a venture capital company and was starting to put the team together. And one of the senior people that we hired looked at me and he said, like, your work is bullshit. Like, I don't even understand why we have you. And like, God, if you ever want to like fire me up, tell me, like, bet against me.
Yeah.
And I will go to the ends of the earth to like
I love
prove
that.
you wrong. I don't know where that comes from, but I like have never been put off by like, I'm older now. Like I'm 56 years old. Like I grew up in a time where I was the only woman in the room for a really long time. And I love that. I think it's a competitive advantage.
But it brings such like an energy and a spice to this space. HR, as you hate to call
Yeah.
it, but can be branded and frankly, like deservedly in some scenarios.
Oh,
right?
I mean,
It creates its own reputation of this very.
I think there's a
PC
lot of people like, I love
slow-moving
people.
and-
Like, God, if you want to
But
work
then the
with me.
leaders in it aren't
they're-
real. They're not. So this is just
Yeah.
so refreshing to hear.
Thanks.
Scaling with soul.
Scaling with soul, yeah. One of your mottos, and I'm fascinated by that. What does scaling with soul mean to you? Like, what does that actually mean on the inside for people that
Sure.
might be watching?
For me, it means, I having grown up in startups, I think I had this idea in my head, like, oh my gosh, if I ever went to work for Fidelity or name any larger organization, I'd be fired in 30 seconds. Because like that's, obviously I'm a little bit irreverent. I like to do what I think is right, not necessarily follow the rules and all of that kind of stuff. And I thought bigger companies probably suck. And that's really unfair. I think there's a lot of companies that are much larger and are great. But when the company did go public, or we were about to go public, I looked at my CEO and I said, all right, true to form, like I told you I was going to leave when we had an event. Here's the event. I'm out. And he said exactly what you say to somebody like me, which is, Christina, nice job getting here. Get us to a couple thousand people, have it still be an amazing place to be, and then you can claim victory and quit.
Yeah.
God, damn it! Like he's
the
right.
goalpost on ya.
And I'm so grateful that I stayed, because it gave me the chance to really figure out, how do you scale this thing? I think it's easy to have a strong culture when you're 100 people or everyone's located in the same building and everyone knows each other, whatever. But as you scale, how do you keep that soul alive? And if you think about, for me, it all comes down to culture and stuff. And if you think about building a company like you would build a home, you have to have a really solid foundation, and that for me is the culture of the company. And what do you believe in? Who do you define yourself as, and who do you aspire to be? And be like relentlessly consistent about that in terms of how you weave that into every element of the employee life cycle, from how you hire people to how you promote people, how you fire people even. And not let that go even as you begin to scale and even as you begin to become global and have people all over the place. So that's, for me, I want the sentiment, the thing that I guess the best example of it is we've won a number of awards for best places to work and stuff. I know those are important to people because they help you recruit people and all that. I don't really give a shit about the awards. I shouldn't say that, but I really don't. What I do care about, though, is that we've won them year after year as we've been at different sizes. So when we first started winning them when we were 100 people, like, yay, great.
Company.
But then you're like at 250 people, 500 people, global, and now we're 2,500 people. Like the fact that we've held on to that culture and kept it, it's evolved over the years, but those values for us are still such a core piece of who we are. That for me is scale and whistle.
Yeah. I think culture dilution is such a real thing, and it is a real challenge. What are you gave a few, you alluded to it there, it sits in that kind of authenticity, being yourself, like sticking to your principles no matter what through all those different phases. But are there any really practical tips or tips that people could take away and go I'm going to do that tomorrow? Or are there any bits that you do that you think, I don't think anyone else is really doing this or not doing it as well maybe,
Sure.
that you think is that driver that keeps that culture strong and doesn't allow it to dilute?
I think just being really clear on what you value. If you walk into Rapid7, you won't see our core values written on a wall or on a coffee cup, and that's really intentional. I don't necessarily care if people can say them and their meanings word by word. What I care about is, do you embody them? Do you understand them? Do you embrace them? Because it is the one thread that connects us all together, no matter what role you play in the company. So I would advocate that companies do that as early as possible, and not let go of it. You have to be as relentless about that as you are with forecasting your revenue and things like that, and tying it to every piece of your human experiences. And I know that sounds like a lot of work, and maybe it sounds touchy-feely. I would argue it's one of the things that will allow you to scale.
Can I ask a practical question?
Yeah,
there?
of course.
What does that look like at Rapid7? So is that every time you've got a company-wide all hands or a town hall or whatever, you're reiterating them? Is that
we do? I mean, it goes. I'll give you a couple of practical examples. So we have 5 core values. There's 5 days of the week that we work. Every day during the pandemic, we started doing. We live and die by Slack. We're always on Slack. And we started an announcements channel to keep everyone just sort of up to date with what was going on during that period of time. And every morning at 7 a.m., announcements would come out to align everybody on what was going on. And then we started adding core value shout outs. We started this thing at the 14 years ago. As soon as we articulated the culture, I do everything as cheaply as possible. I never lost that startup route. So we started at the time, I think we were really into music, and I thought, what's cheaper than guitar picks? You can buy guitar picks in bulk for a penny a piece. So we would give each other guitar picks, and if one of our values was impact together, it's by our people for our people. So as an employee, I could say Ben is showing his impact together by da 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 da. And it would show up in a scrolling hall of fame that everyone had access to. So you'd actually get a physical guitar pick, which is stupid, but people started decorating with them and doing cool things. But you'd also be on this thing and you could just see people's stuff. Years later, right? Now we probably get several thousand of those a quarter of people calling each other out, attributing to a value. And then every day, we pick a different core value to highlight, and we highlight somebody from around the globe so that we're celebrating Ben today because of Impact Together, whatever.
Every day.
And every single work day. And people get to see that, and they get so excited, yay, Belfast got a shout out today, or yay, Singapore, whatever. So I try to be really mindful about who I pick and choose and whatever, so there's a lot of diversity in the choices. And then at the end of every quarter, we look at all the thousands of nominations that came in, and we try to highlight each core value. So somebody we celebrate 5 core values by calling them out and celebrating those people globally in town hall. So that's just one silly example. But as we're promoting people, you could be amazing at your job. You could have an incredible skill set. If you are not additive to our culture, you're not getting promoted, right? You could be great, but if you're not collaborative, if you're not whatever, insert name of value that we care about, you're probably it's not. So we really hold ourselves accountable to them.
And how do you measure on the swing side of that the lack of those things? So it's easy to see.
It stands out.
It stands out. How do you manage around that, manage out around
I'll
that?
just keep going on Impact Together. That's ours for collaboration and whatever. I've never met anyone in my life who does not suggest they're a team player. Everyone wants to think they're a team player. Let's be honest. Some people are not. Yeah. And we'll like probe on that during interviews or whatever. But if somebody slips through and they're like, they really like to go off by themselves, do their own work, never share it with anyone else, roll it out, and then they get really offended when people are like, oh, did you think about X, Y, and Z? And they're actually trying to collaborate to make it better. Those people don't last very long because they're miserable. They don't want to collaborate. They don't want anyone's input. And I think the whole ethos of our company is kind of 1 + 1 = 3, right? Like I've never rolled anything out without checking with different constituencies to make sure that it may make sense in my mind, but it may not make sense to that population of engineers or those go-to-customer people. So I think we all sort of work in a way that doesn't mean you have to check the box with every single person in the company, but it does mean we try to be really mindful about making sure we're being as thoughtful as possible and collaborating with others before we do something.
When you're hiring against those values or you're bringing people on the way in, because we're doing a project at the moment at Bond around this and also for some of our partners, how do you screen that on the way in? So it sounds like values are number one. The person, the individual.
Yeah, we've kind of
obviously there'll be skills that are involved in that.
Yeah,
as well,
we try to look at it with like, sounds so corny, but like 3 C's, right? Company, craft, and culture. Company is really, can this person drive impact to the customer, to the whatever it is they're doing. Craft, which is, do they just have the basic skills to do the job? And then culture, do they believe in these value sets? Will they embrace them? We look at all 3 of those things. So you could be 2 of them and maybe show promise towards one. And it's not to say you have to nail all 3 of them at the top of the level to get hired, but we actively probe on them. And we'll ask as many clever questions as we can. We're not just like, do you believe in impact together? That's not going to mean anything to anyone, but we will tease out, how do you like to collaborate or how do you like to work and things like that.
Yeah. How do you handle the tricky situation where we come across it a lot, and I'm in biotech, you need a really specific technical skill set or a really specific scientific PhD skill set.
Yep.
But that person may be an expert in one area, but maybe isn't by nature a team player,
Sure.
or maybe their role doesn't even actually really require that.
Sure.
But that's a non-negotiable.
Yeah.
Is there room for, and how do you handle that balance between needing to check all those boxes in terms of like what a Rapid 7 person is,
Sure.
but equally leaving room for, okay, you're a brilliant mind and
Sure.
you're a software developer and we actually need you headphones on doing your incredible work all day long anyway. Is there room for both?
It depends on the culture of your company. Yeah. Because I would say in our company, no.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, we have a lot of really, really intelligent people.
But they're both.
But they have to be both. I'll be really, like, if you've met a lot of security people, I would not suggest a lot of them are like off the charts on the super extroverted scale, right? And they don't need to be. But it does mean they have to want to work with others. They do have to, like, it was very telling to me when we went in the pandemic. We were such an in-person culture that the day we sent people home, people freaked out and said, there's no way I can work from home. I have to work with my team, etc. Some of our most introverted people were like, this is awesome. Like, I'm so excited. But even after a month, they were like, oh, I need human. Like, I think I've gotten so used to working with other people. Like, this is becoming problematic for me. In a biotech company, it might be a very different culture. That might be totally appropriate. And it's all about what you value and not letting go of that. I think it's really easy. I think as companies begin to grow and scale and say, like, we're so busy right now, we can't really think about that, or whatever, they'll just take the eye off the soft thing. It's not soft at all. I would just argue it's not soft at all. You have to be pretty relentless about it.
I think that's it's a thing that companies struggle to get right, but it's almost, when you think about it, it's almost overcomplicated in the sense that, yes, you can't negotiate on being a good person, or like, and you need the skill set too, but there are some things that are in the middle that are just the things that are important to us as a company. You don't have to be an extrovert, but you have to have the right intentions in mind. You have to be a company person.
We're all really different. I mean, the easiest way, this is a little obnoxious, but like back in the day when we could be slightly more irreverent, we have to be a little careful because we're public now. But the easiest way to define our culture a long time ago was don't be an asshole. And we like had shirts that said it. Like, if you really want to understand who we are, that's it. Like, it's a pretty low bar. But it's amazing how many people like are.
Yeah.
Right? And you're like, I don't care how smart you are.
Yeah.
I don't want to be on a team with you.
Yeah.
So that became like a really basic.
It's such a cool standard to set, though, because that seems like a simple thing, but it's in execution, it's actually, that's not common, right? Like, you do get a lot of, and we all know, one fly in the ointment spoils.
Absolutely.
If you let that go, it spoils a culture so quickly.
But I think if I go back to the statement I made earlier, where, you know, one of the things that's allowed me to find any success in this work has been partnering with the right CEO. Because I think, you know, people learn about this stuff in the people side of the business in business school or whatever. Like, studying it is really different than actually executing it. And I've worked with a series of CEOs at this point who none of them would probably say they totally understand how to do the people stuff, but they understand how important it is. And then they'll just say, just have at it. But in our company, like, I cannot say enough about our CEO. He is extraordinary for a host of reasons. Like, I don't think I've ever worked with anyone who operates with more integrity than he does, which is a pretty big deal to me. He's also probably always the smartest person in the room, but never behaves that way. Like, he really does believe he can learn something from everyone. But he also deeply cares about the how we do things through our people, etc. So we've sat next to each, like, we're literally, our desks are like this next to each other for the last 14 years. And I think we play off of each other so well. So I mean, that is such a gift. And candidly, why I've probably been there for 14 years, because it's not lost on me how rare that is to find.
We spoke about like HR and TA feeling like undervalued, misunderstood. I know we've had that conversation in the past, and you're kind of putting the credit there on the CEO, who I'm sure is exceptional, right? What role do you think you played, though, in making sure that the people function wasn't undervalued, wasn't misunderstood, it was something that had weight? Because obviously the CEO has real natural affinity towards that space, right, which helps. But for those people leaders out there that maybe want to influence that space, they maybe want to influence the CEO, who might have those tendencies or not have those tendencies, what do you think you're doing or a CPO could do to make sure that it's valued, the space is understood, it's got power, it's got energy?
That's such a hard question to answer, because it's like, let me tell you what makes me really special. But I mean, if I'm being honest, I think you've probably figured out, like, I say what I think. And I don't think of myself as a human resources person. I think of myself as a business person who happens to major in people. And I think that's sort of a different lens to look at it through. I'm always trying to figure out what is the business trying to accomplish, and then how do I work backwards to figure out what we need to do with our people to execute that well. And I also probably ask the questions that people are thinking and don't have the courage to say. Like, I have no problem having hard conversations, and I try to humanize them. And I think, to be really candid, like, being a woman working with a lot of men is a massive advantage. For whatever reason, I probably shouldn't say this publicly, but like, for whatever reason, the guys that I work with will communicate with me in a very different way than they probably communicate with each other. I look at that as a competitive, in a different way. So I take whatever little crack in the door I can find and kind of have no problem
using it,
busting that open. Right. So I think that's probably it. I know that's a personality type rather than a skill type. But I think we've put so much emphasis on the how we do things. You know, you can have a great HR team, you can offer great benefits and great whatever, and all those things are really important. But I think at the end of the day, providing the why to people, why you're making the choices. I'm not one of those people that's like, it's all whatever our employees want, we'll roll out the red carpet. That doesn't last. That's like if you have kids, like, I mean, I'm never going to make my kids totally like whatever you want. I'm pissing someone off. But I do try to say, like, what is it we're trying to accomplish as a business? If I look at how do we delight our customers, how do we have a healthy business, and how do we make sure our people are all firing on all cylinders and feeling really good about their experience and hit that sweet spot in the middle, then I'm feeling like we're doing something pretty special. So I'm just pretty motivated by that.
It's awesome.
So a conversation that came up with another House of Visionaries resident was about the difference between some HR functions that feel like, and as we talked about before, it's not just, they're not victims to that. I think in some scenarios, like they feel like what I was going to say is a support function because they carry themselves that way, or they interact with the business in that way. You are a representation of the swing side of that, which is you're not a support function. You are at the table with the other functional leaders of the business, and the people strategy, the HR strategy, the human element of it, and your entire people strategy at the company is just as important as revenue and everything else.
I sort of hold the bar, and I tell this to everyone that is on my team, which is like, how do you make yourself invaluable, right? I hate that whole, how do I get a seat at the table? Like, it's like what you do with the seat when you get it. Are you taking advantage of that seat? Do you have a unique voice that is adding something different to the conversation? It's not just about just sitting there. I mean, who cares, right? So I think what I've tried to help our team understand is, how do you add value? What does impact look like? How do you get business leaders to say, I am not making that decision without checkpointing it with Christy first, right? If you're in that situation, if people are not making decisions because they have not gotten your input, then you know you're pretty good at what you're doing.
Yeah. They trust you as like
they trust you.
It's not
compass. They're doing it because HR told me to. Then they're going to get in trouble. You're going to fill in the gaps that they're not thinking about.
Really cool.
One final question, because everyone's talking about it. What's your take on AI? How do you feel AI is going to impact kind of people, Rapid7, like within HR and TA specifically? Like how are you viewing it at the moment?
I think that it's an inevitable thing. It's going to happen, so fighting it is stupid. I think that the way that we're thinking about it, or I'm trying to get our team to think about it, is this could really help us get rid of the low-hanging fruit crap that we hate doing, so that we can spend our time on the more impactful work. Wouldn't that be great? And I think I've gotten most people there, but I think people have a lot of fear about it's going to lose jobs or whatever. We have a lot of job security in the human side of things. I mean, if I can get AI to help people sign up for benefits or answer bullshit,
survey,
whatever questions, like great. That's like less time we need to spend doing that stuff, so we can get into the meat of the work. And I don't think any technology will ever replace human connection. You just can't, like, there are things that we can do sitting down with people that you could never do. It's sort of like, this is a poor analogy, but every company has sort of had to come out of the pandemic and figure, are we going to be remote? Are we going to be hybrid? Are we going to be who do we want to be? And I think it's completely dependent on who your company is and what they want to focus on. We are hybrid because we know that impact together, that collaboration piece is huge. And we found that during the pandemic, can you get stuff done? For sure. People can be really productive. We have smart, talented people. There's a big difference between getting stuff done and adding true impact. And a lot of that true impact for us comes with sitting down. I have a much different vibe from you two sitting down with you than I do if we were just emailing each other or a Slack or whatever. So I'm not saying anything's bad or good. I'm just saying it's a different thing. I feel the same way about AI. It can enable us to be productive, but I don't think it will ever replace those down and dirty big pieces.
I think you're a fantastic example of where AI can't go. I think AI is going to be able to do a lot of things for us, but it can't replicate you. The energy you bring, your vision, your authenticity, the way you've impacted the business, the multiple scale-ups that you work in. I think, and that's where I don't want us to lose that view. I don't want people to go into the AI space from a human point of view, or from people, HR, talent space, go into AI and forget that actually we're all still people and being authentic.
Right.
inspiring people.
But that's
all
one of the things that
we
makes
do.
me really nervous about this field is I think there's still so many people that approach it transactionally, right? You have to fill out this survey. You have to do this. It's so transactional, and that can be replaced.
Yeah.
There's nothing special about that, right? So yeah, I mean, but I think this is where the fun work is, right? This is going to sound so arrogant. I don't mean it to at all. But like, I don't spend a lot of time worrying about what everyone else is doing, right? I mean, I like love learning from other companies and what other people are up to. But I don't want to follow a best practice. I want to be the best practice, and that's very freeing, right? I mean, if you're not worried about being judged by what other companies are doing, or so all these great companies are doing this. I don't care. That probably doesn't work for us. So like, we'll do what we think is the right thing to do. That is a very special place to be.
Yeah, it's authentic, it's real.
Yeah.
And it's also trusting your own trusting in your abilities and the team around you as well, to say, this is what they were doing, but I back us and our team to find the right thing for us.
Yeah.
We're gonna back ourselves to do it.
I think you mentioned the beginning of COVID when it was the Wild West, right? Nobody knew what to do.
Yeah.
At the very least, being in a CPO role, you've never gone through a global pandemic.
No, it was
before.
awesome.
And uncharted territory, right?
It was my favorite year of my
Uncharted
career.
territory, but you had a blank slate to figure out how are we going to play this thing. But
Yeah.
I think that you said this and it stuck with me of you kind of approached the people, and rather than going on to that very first all hands or that town hall being like, listen guys, here's a strategy, we're confident in this, we know what we're doing, just follow us here.
Yeah.
Didn't you say that you sort of said to them, we're going to figure this out together, what do you want from us? Like, how can we?
Yeah, almost.
That's you being humble, though.
We saw a lot of companies start to say, what would you like, people? And that's really dangerous, right? If I ask my children, what do you want? Guess what? I'm going to get different answers, and I'm going to piss someone off because I'm not going to give them what they, and I ask for their opinion, and then I'm not delivering.
True.
So instead of doing that, we did it the opposite way and said, this is what we think we need to do for this company to thrive whenever it is that we can come back together. And we will work with you to make sure that that works. There's dynamics and whatever, but we're telling you what we think is really important for the health of the business.
Yeah.
And then we'll work with you to make it work.
Yeah. Yeah.
Amazing.
Christina, thank you.
Thank you.
What an
Thank you for
amazing
having me.
conversation. This is taken, kind of unfold in such an organic way, but there's so many good tidbits and just, I think, authenticity that comes from the way that you lead, and it doesn't all have to be over-engineered. It's just leading in an incredibly human way. So thank you.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
I loved it.
Appreciate it.